Hey, this is Scott. Don't mind the harsh sun. I'm at the top of a mountain and today we're going to talk about making time-lapse videos. If this is your first time to this channel, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos and hit subscribe if you want to see more in the future. So lots of cameras have their own built-in time-lapse movie settings, and we're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be taking raw photos so that way we can process them and get the most out of the images, and then put them together ourselves with a lot more control in post-production. So just a little quick background on time-lapse in general. What it is basically really high-speed video, usually at like 1 frame per second or somewhere around there. Normal video, around 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, is usually shot with a shutter speed of double the frames per second. So for example, 1/50th or 1/60th of a second shutter speed. The reason for that is because usually with our eyes we see a bit of blur in things that are moving, and if things are way too crisp, it looks a little bit unnatural. Shooting slow motion video, you're going to be shooting at 60 frames per second or even higher, so you're going to want to double that and get 1/125th of a second for your shutter speed. It's a little bit more flexible. Basically, when you're seeing things slowed down, it's not natural, and anyway, you want to see it more clearly because it's moving slowly. And when you see it moving slowly, if it's still blurry, it's going to just look out of focus. So the opposite is true for when you're shooting time-lapse. You're going to be shooting at like 1 frame per second, for example. So if you double that, you're going to be getting 1/2 a second for your shutter speed. So the reason is when you're shooting things really fast, you're going to want them to have a certain amount of blur, again, so that they blend together into a smooth video, not just a series of images. When you're shooting at that slow of a shutter speed though, what works for you is going to depend a little bit on your subject matter, how fast it's moving, how far it is, stuff like that. So you'll have to experiment a little bit. The same goes for the amount of time you have between each shot. It's going to depend on how much your subject is moving between each shot that's taken. If you have a bunch of shots that are really close together but your subject barely moves, it's not going to really look like it's moving. But the opposite, if you wait too long in between shots, you might have your subject moving way too much in between each frame and it looks like it's jumping from 1 second to the next. So the problem with this is when I want to shoot at 1/2 a second, for example, like today in the middle of the day, you're going to have problems with getting your shutter speed that slow. So you're going to want to definitely use some ND filters to help that out. Of course, you're going to also need a tripod for this, preferably a steady one, so that way your camera doesn't move in between shots. I personally like to shoot in manual exposure, so that way if a cloud comes by or something, my exposure won't change and the video won't look like it's flickering between exposures. I'll also use manual focus, of course, for the same reason, and I'll keep my auto white balance on something consistent, again, so that way it keeps consistent and looks smooth over the entire video. So today I'm going to be shooting with the Canon 5D Mark IV, which does have a built-in intervalometer, which will help you to take a series of shots, which is necessary for time-lapse. You can also use an external remote or something, which has maybe different functions depending on which one you get, but for today we're just going to stick with what's built into the camera. I'll be using a 16-35 f4 lens, and I only have with me right now a ND4 and an ND8 filter, so I'll stack them, and I'll be shooting at f16 and I believe 0.4 seconds. I checked just a minute ago and that was the settings I got. So let's take a look at what settings we have to use in camera for the built-in intervalometer. Okay, so now we're just going to quickly take a look at setting the time-lapse up in the camera. This will differ from camera to camera, and I'm using the 5D Mark IV, so it may look a little bit different depending on what you're using. We're in the first menu here on page 4, and we're going to use this interval timer. Before that, I just want to show you quickly, if you're using mirror lockup, then the interval timer is disabled, so you want to make sure that that's off if you're having some issues. So we'll go ahead and enable that, and you'll see some information on screen about your current settings, and down the bottom you can see that if you press the info button, you can set the details. So we'll do that, and it will look like this. It'll have the interval, which is the time between the shots that you're taking, as well as the number of shots. Now again, remember this will be different from camera to camera. This is the 5D Mark IV, so your settings may differ from this. This interval here will really depend on the scene that you're shooting and how much movement there is. I found for moving clouds, for example, somewhere between 2 and 4 seconds has worked out pretty well for me. It depends how close they are and how fast they're moving, and that will definitely depend on you. So you want to experiment a little bit and just see what matches whatever situation you're shooting. Your number of shots will depend on how long you want the video to be, and also what frame rate you're going to make the final video in. So for example, if your final video will be 24 frames per second, then you're going to need 24 shots to make up 1 second of video. If you're doing 10 seconds of final video, then you're going to need 240 shots. And you'll just have to do the math to figure that out. On the 5D Mark IV, the number of shots can go from 1 to 99, or you can set it to unlimited. When you're set to unlimited, you're going to want to make sure that you calculate how much time you're going to be shooting for, again, based on the number of shots that you need and how long is in between the shots. Also, when you're using the unlimited mode, to stop the shooting, you're just going to turn the camera off. So when you have your settings all set, you're going to click OK and exit out of the menu. Just as a quick note, when you press the shutter button, the interval shooting will start. So before you do all of this, you want to make sure that you got your focus set and switch it to manual focus so it doesn't change from shot to shot, as well as all your other settings. So now that we're all set, we're going to go ahead and either push our shutter button, or if you're using a remote release, you can push that to start our series of shots. If you do push the shutter by hand, just keep in mind that you may want to throw out the first 1 or 2 shots just because there may be some kind of motion blur from your hand actually pushing the shutter, especially at such slow shutter speeds as you're usually using when you shoot time-lapse. Once you push the shutter, it will take the first shot, and after that you can hear now it will take a shot every 3 seconds because that's what I had set. And when you want to finish, just turn the camera off and it will write whatever it's writing to the card and turn off. So now let's go over to the computer and see what we're going to do in post-production to make our time lapse. Okay, so I've gone ahead and imported and processed the raw files in Capture One Pro. I will post another video with that whole process, so if you want to see how I did that, just check the description below and I'll put a link down there. So the benefit of shooting raw files for your time-lapse instead of using the in-camera built-in time-lapse movie mode is that you'll be able to really have a lot of leeway with processing the raw files. The same way that you would usually shoot RAW for stills instead of JPEG, you'll get the most out of these files to use for your time-lapse when you shoot it in RAW and then put it together yourself. So I output the full resolution JPEGs here. I want to have a little bit of leeway to zoom in or zoom out or do some kind of pan or something in post-processing when I'm putting the video together. So if I output the full resolution files, I have a lot more to work with that way. I'm going to put this together in Final Cut Pro 10, so we'll open that up. I will make a new event for this and a new project, of course. I will name this Mount Kuishi Time Lapse. I want to create a new project. I'm going to do this in 1080p at 24 frames per second, and everything else is just fine, so I'll click OK. And now I will go to that event and just rename the project Mount Kuishi Time Lapse. And I want to import all of those JPEGs. So I will go to that folder. And I will select all of those images here. And import selected. So now we have all of our images here. Click Command A to select all of them and hit the E key to put them all into our timeline back to back. We're going to hit Shift Z just to see everything and click Command A to select them all. And we're going to hit Control D to bring up this control here. And we want each image to be 1 frame in this movie, so we will just hit 1 and enter, and then all of the images will go down to 1 frame. Again, we're going to hit Shift Z to kind of spread it out and see everything. While we still have them all selected, we're going to hit Option G to create a compound clip, and I'll just leave the name as it is and click OK. And now we have one neat clip there. I'll give it a second just to render these files and we'll take a look at how it looks. Okay, so we're just about finished rendering here, so we are going to close out of that and get rid of this, clean up our view a little bit, and let's take a look at how it looks. So just as a note, this is not meant to be an amazing time-lapse or anything. It was meant just for the purpose of this video. Normally I would try to avoid having something in the foreground like this that you can so easily see moving. It kind of takes away from that smooth effect of the time-lapse, but for the moment you'll get the idea. So obviously the aspect ratio of the shots that we took and the video are different, so we're going to go over to the side here to the transform panel, and we can use the scale image to make it bigger and zoom in how much we want. We have a lot of leeway because we exported the full size JPEGs, so I could zoom in quite a bit if I wanted to, and I'm just going to zoom in enough to cut off those black bars on the side at the moment. Another thing you could do is to scale only the x-axis, and it will stretch your image a bit. Depending on what you're shooting, this may or may not be something you want to do. It might look good, it might not look good. For this, I think it's actually not that big of a deal, but I'm still just going to go with the regular scale option for now. Now there are lots of things that you could do with this because we have a lot of extra resolution compared to the 1080p video size. you could really scale it in a bit more, and then you could keyframe it so that way it's going to move up or down or something like that. At the beginning of the video, I will move it down and add a keyframe there, and let's just go to the end of the video and move it up a bit, and you'll just get this kind of panning effect. This is actually kind of a long video, so it's pretty slow, but depending on how long your video is and how much you move it, you'll get a different amount of movement. You could do this up and down or sideways or both, but you'll get the idea from that. Another effect you could do is the Ken Burns effect. So you can go down to this crop option and choose Ken Burns. You could also choose that from the crop menu on the side here. It'll give you a start and end point. You can adjust the position and size. I'll just do this really quickly to show you for the video. Let's crop that way in there. And I think I got a little bit of the black bars on the outside here, so move that. And let's just see how that looks. Click done, and then you can go and play your video, and it will make that movement from the start to the end of your clip, and it looks something like this. So some of these techniques could actually help you to make it look like you have a slider or something when you actually don't. You could pan from side to side or zoom into the image a little bit. We have plenty of space to work with because of the full-size JPEGs, so you don't have to worry about losing any quality or sharpness by zooming in. It's just a really easy way to have a lot of control over the final result. So after this, of course, you could add a lot of different effects, a vignette, some color grading, whatever you want to do, and then you can export the video. But basically, this is how you put together a time-lapse manually in Final Cut Pro. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and I will do my best to get back to you. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and as always, thank you for watching.